Imagine just for a second that you are looking at a blueprint for a country that is, by almost every conceivable traditional metric, verified statistical utopia.
Right.
We are talking about top-tier, just eye-watering wealth.
Yeah.
We're talking about near-perfect health outcomes, where systemic risks are, well, they're practically engineered out of existence.
Yeah, completely optimized.
Exactly. And you're looking at incredible foundational gender equality, plus an education system that is literally the envy of the entire world.
Right. I mean, when you look at the raw numbers, you are looking at a nation that has essentially cracked the code on human well-being.
Yeah.
They've solved this sort of 20th century puzzle of how to build a thriving society.
Exactly. You look at their scorecard, and by every measure we have historically used to judge human progress, this country is winning the game.
Definitely.
They aren't just participating, they are at the absolute pinnacle of the pyramid. But, and here's the hook, what if we introduced a completely different scorecard?
A totally new set of rules.
Right. One that doesn't just measure the immediate benefits enjoyed by the citizens today, but actually measures the true, hidden, physical cost of that exact same success.
Which changes everything.
It really does. Because what if, on that new scorecard, this utopian country completely plummets down the ranks?
It creates a massive, almost uncomfortable paradox.
Yeah, it does.
And it forces you to pause and ask yourself a very fundamental question, right? Like, what exactly are we measuring when we measure quote-unquote success?
Right.
Because if your success is quietly reliant on an unsustainable foundation, is it really success at all?
And that paradox is exactly what we're unpacking today. Welcome to this deep dive. We have a truly fascinating stack of sources in front of us.
You really do.
We're looking at a comprehensive, highly detailed presentation deck that dissects the 2023-2024 Human Development Report.
And to be clear to the listener, this isn't just a surface-level quick-hit summary.
No, not at all.
This material is backed by extensive, multi-decade data sets, data that compares global averages against one specific, incredibly revealing case study.
Which is the Netherlands.
Exactly. The Netherlands is arguably the perfect test subject for this exact paradox.
Why is that, you think?
Well, it gives us a pristine laboratory to examine both the absolute heights of human achievement and, crucially, the hidden trapdoors of modern prosperity.
It really is the ultimate case study. So our mission for this deep dive is not just to, sit here and read a bunch of statistics at you.
Right. Nobody wants it.
We are going to investigate a fundamental conflict. We're going to explore the Netherlands' absolute triumph in traditional human development, and then
the drop.
Yeah, we are going to look at its shocking 27-place free fall when it comes to planetary boundaries.
Which is just a staggering drop.
And massive. So we're asking you to sit back and consider a pretty heavy question.
Yeah.
Like, what is the hidden cost of prosperity?
Yeah.
And is our current definition of success secretly bankrupting the Earth?
It's a question that completely reorients how you view global progress. But to tackle this, we really need to start by understanding the baseline.
Right.
Before we can talk about the hidden costs, we have to look at how we've traditionally measured a good life. We have to look at the Human Development Index, or the HDI.
Okay, let's unpack that, because I think a lot of people hear Human Development Index and they vaguely know it means, like, is this country doing well?
Right, yeah.
But they don't know the mechanics. And before we can understand the fall from grace, we really have to understand the height of the pedestal the Netherlands is actually sitting on.
Exactly.
So what exactly is the HDI measuring?
So the HDI was actually a revolutionary concept when it was first introduced back in 1990.
Oh, wow. So it's been around for over 30 years.
Yeah. And before the HDI came along, economists and global policymakers essentially just looked at gross domestic product, GDP.
Right. Just the money.
Exactly. The logic was blunt. If a country's economy made a lot of money, it was considered developed.
Yeah, that makes sense for the time.
But the creators of the HDI argued that people and their actual capabilities and freedoms should be the ultimate criteria for assessing the development of a country.
Not just raw economic growth alone.
Precisely.
Right, because you could have a massive GDP, but still have citizens who are uneducated or dying young.
Exactly.
So the HEI was a way to force us to look at the human experience, not just the bank account.
That's a great way to put it. So it evaluates 3 core pillars of human experience.
Okay.
First, health specifically, living a long and healthy life.
Okay.
Second, knowledge, which is access to education across a lifespan.
Right.
And third, standard of living, having the material resources necessary for a decent life.
Got it.
And the index takes all this complex data from those three pillars and boils it all down into a single, clean score between 0 and 1.
A score between 0 and 1.
Okay.
And looking at the 2023 data from our sources, the Netherlands sits at an HDI of 0.955.
Which is an extraordinarily high number.
It sounds like it.
It formally places the Netherlands in the very top tier, what the UN actually classifies as the very high human development group.
Wow.
To give you the exact global placement, out of 203 nations evaluated in this report, the Netherlands ranks 8th in the entire world.
Number 8 out of over 200 countries.
Yes.
I mean, they're essentially operating in the 96th percentile of human existence.
Absolutely.
And just to ground that 0.955 score for you listening, we really need to compare it to the rest of the planet.
Right.
So what is the global average HDI right now?
In 2023, the global average HDI sits at just 0.756.
Oh, 0.756. Okay.
So the Netherlands isn't just slightly ahead, they're operating in an entirely different developmental stratosphere.
And I really want to dig into how they get to that 0.955 because the data gets super interesting when you break down those three pillars you mentioned.
really does.
Let's start with that third pillar, the standard of living. Because from what I'm seeing in the presentation deck, the wealth gap between the Netherlands and the global average isn't just a gap.
No.
It's a chasm.
It is. So the standard of living pillar is measured by gross national income, or GNI, per capita.
Okay.
But importantly, this is adjusted for purchasing power parity.
Right. The PPP adjustment.
Exactly. We don't just use a flat currency exchange rate because a dollar buys you a very different amount of goods in Oslo than it does in Mumbai.
Right. That makes total sense.
So adjusting for purchasing power means we're comparing the actual physical goods and services a person can secure with their income.
Okay. I love that adjustment because it makes the comparison actually fair.
Yeah, it levels it out.
Like if I make $68,000 but a loaf of bread costs $50,
right.
I'm not rich.
Exactly.
So purchasing power parity levels the playing field. With that fair comparison in place, what are the actual numbers?
The data shows that the global average GNI per capita is $20,327.
Okay.
In the Netherlands, it is $68,344.
Wait, so the baseline average income for a Dutch citizen is nearly 3.5 times higher than the global average?
It is exactly a 3.4x multiplier.
That's insane.
Yeah. You are looking at a national economic engine that provides an immense, incredibly deep baseline of material security for its population.
So people aren't stressing about basic survival.
Right. It means the vast majority of citizens are not operating in survival mode. Their basic hierarchy of needs food, shelter, security is thoroughly met.
Wow.
But what's crucial to understand about the Dutch system, according to the sources, is that this immense wealth doesn't just sit statically in bank accounts.
Okay.
And it doesn't just get hoarded by a few at the very top.
That's a key point.
It is actively and aggressively deployed by the state to build up the other two pillars of the HDI, health and knowledge.
And we definitely need to talk about the knowledge pillar because the education statistics in this report are frankly hard to wrap my head around.
They are pretty staggering.
The HDI measures education in two distinct ways, right?
Correct. It basically looks at the future and the present.
Okay.
First, it measures expected years of schooling for a young child entering the education system today.
Makes sense.
Second, it measures mean years of schooling, which is the actual completed years of education for adults age 25 and older who have already gone through the system.
Okay, so let's look at the expectation first.
Yeah.
What is the structural expectation for a kid starting school globally versus in the Netherlands?
Globally, the expected years of schooling sits at exactly 13-point-utter years.
So 13 years.
Right. Practically speaking, that gets a student through primary school and secondary education, essentially graduating high school.
Okay, that's the world average.
But in the Netherlands, a child entering the school system today has an expected 18.6 years of schooling ahead of them.
18.6 years.
Yeah.
I want you to really think about what that means for a human lifespan. If a kid starts pre-kindergarten at what, age 4 or 5?
Usually.
18.6 years means the systemic baseline expectation is that they will stay in the education system all the way through a university master's degree.
Exactly.
It's not a rare exception for the elite. It is the structural baseline of the entire society.
It is. The system is funded, designed, and culturally oriented to produce highly specialized advanced degree citizens as the norm. not the outlier.
Wow.
And you see the actual results of that long-term strategy when you look at the second metric, the mean years of schooling for adults who are already in the workforce.
Right, the reality on the ground right now.
Exactly. Globally, the average adult over 25 has completed a mere 8.8 years of schooling.
8.8, wow.
In the Netherlands, the average is 12.7 years.
So the average Dutch adult has essentially completed high school and at least some higher education or specialized vocational training,
Right.
while the global average adult didn't even make it to high school.
Yeah, that's the gap.
You can immediately see how that transforms a society.
Yeah,
I mean, if everyone around you has 12 to 18 years of education, that changes the labor market.
it changes everything.
It changes how people vote. It changes civic engagement. It changes innovation.
It fundamentally changes the complexity of the economy a country can actually sustain.
Yeah.
And what's vital to note from the data sets is that this didn't just organically happen overnight. We have a 30-year track record presented in this report.
Okay, let's look at the history.
Back in 1990, the Netherlands had an HDI of 0.855.
Still high, but not 0.955.
Exactly. Over 3 decades, they have steadily, intentionally climbed to 0.955.
Wow.
They have effectively established a 25% lead over the global average, which only managed to move from 0.608 to 0.756 in that exact same 30-year time frame.
And there were some really specific, fascinating historical data points in that 30-year climb that show just how intentional this was.
Oh, absolutely.
I was looking at the education stats from the mid-90s in the source material. In 1994, there was this massive, almost unnatural leap in the data.
Yes, the 1994 leap.
For Dutch men, the expected years of schooling jumped from 15.3 years in 1993 to 17.8 years in 1994.
Just a massive spike.
That is a 2.5-year jump in expectation in a single 12-month period.
Right, and that kind of jump in a single year is a massive statistical anomaly. It does not happen by accident.
No, you don't just naturally get everyone staying in school 2 years longer overnight.
Exactly. It is the footprint of a deliberate, systemic intervention by the state.
What kind of intervention?
Well, while the specific legislative details aren't the focus of the HDI index itself, a leap of that magnitude signals that the government changed the parameters of what was possible.
You change the rules.
Right. They likely implemented massive funding expansions, restructured higher education pathways, or fundamentally changed the subsidy model.
To make university vastly more accessible.
Yes. They engineered a more educated future, essentially.
And you can see the payoff of that engineering when you look at their economic resilience in the face of global crises.
Definitely.
Like, look at the data around the COVID-19 shock in 2020.
Oh, yeah, the 2020 dip.
The entire global economy took a massive, unprecedented hit. The Netherlands wasn't immune, obviously.
No, no one was.
Their GNI per capita dropped from over $65,000 in 2019 down to $62,085 in 2020. That's a real hit.
It is a significant drop.
But what is truly staggering is the recovery. The very next year, in 2021, their GNI rebounded powerfully to $68,775.
And that rebound is the hallmark of a highly developed, deeply educated infrastructure.
Right.
When external shocks happen, whether it's a pandemic or a financial crisis, the baseline of human capability and systemic support is so robust that the recovery is swift and decisive.
They didn't lose a decade of economic progress to COVID.
No, they lost a single year and then immediately surpassed their pre-pandemic peak.
Okay, hold on, though. I look at these HDI numbers, and I'm honestly a bit skeptical.
Okay, wait.
Because this feels a bit like judging a massive multinational corporation strictly by looking at its gross revenue and, like, the fact that they have a really nice employee cafeteria.
Just looking at the top line.
Yeah, you're looking at top-line success.
Yeah.
But we all know that averages can hide a lot of sins.
They absolutely can.
It's relatively easy for a small, historically wealthy European country to have incredibly high statistical averages when you mash everyone together.
Right.
But what about the people falling through the cracks? How do we know this so-called utopia isn't just a playground for a privileged few, while a massive underclass props up the average?
That is an absolutely vital, critical question.
Yeah.
And it is exactly why modern development analysts refuse to stop at the basic HDI.
Oh, they don't stop there.
No, because an average is just a mathematical smoothing tool. It means nothing if half the population is systemically left behind or marginalized.
Exactly.
So to determine if the Netherlands' prosperity is authentic, deep-rooted, and actually shared, we have to look at the distribution of that success.
Okay.
We have to apply the Gender Inequality Index, or the GII.
Okay, the invisible glass ceiling metric.
Yes.
I was really eager to get into this part of the data, and spoiler alert for you listening, the Netherlands doesn't just do well here.
No, they dominate.
They essentially provide a masterclass in gender parity. So how exactly does the GII work compared to the standard HDI?
The GII flicks the perspective. While the HDI measures achievement, the GII is a measure of loss.
A measure of loss.
Right. It looks at gender-based disadvantage across 3 specific dimensions: reproductive health, empowerment, and the labor market.
Okay.
It generates a score ranging from 0 to 1. But here, 0 means there is absolute perfect equality between men and women.
Got it.
And 1 means women fare as poorly as possible in all measured dimensions.
Okay, so it's like a golf score. Lower is better.
Exactly.
What is the baseline then? Where does the world sit on this scale?
The global average for the GII in 2023 is 0.455.
0.455.
Yes.
Wow. That represents a massive systemic amount of human potential being squandered purely due to gender disparity.
It really does.
Half the global population is operating with a massive handicap.
Hmm.
So where does the Netherlands score?
The Netherlands boasts a remarkably low GII score of 0.013.
0.013. That is practically a rounding error away from perfect statistical equality.
It is. They rank 5th globally in this metric.
I got it.
And again, the 30-year data set allows us to see the deliberate construction of this equality.
Because it wasn't always like this, right?
Right. This wasn't always their reality. Back in 1990, their GII was 0.122.
Okay, so much higher.
Yeah. And over the last 3 decades, they have systematically dismantled structural inequality year after year, driving that number down to 0.013.
To really understand how they pull that off, how you even get a score of 0.013, we have to look at the first dimension you mentioned, reproductive health.
Yes, it's foundational.
Because reproductive health isn't just, a niche medical issue.
Yeah.
It is the absolute bedrock of economic and social freedom for women.
It truly is.
Think about it. If the biological act of starting a family carries a massive systemic health risk or a high probability of death,
Right.
then everything else, your education, your career trajectory, your ability to hold political power is completely compromised from the very start.
That is precisely the philosophy behind the index. You cannot have empowerment without biological safety.
Exactly.
So the primary metric used here is the maternal mortality ratio, which measures the number of maternal deaths per 100,000 live births.
And the numbers here are stark. What is the global reality of childbirth?
The global average is a tragic 216.1 deaths per 100,000 live births.
216.1.
Yes. In vast parts of the world, pregnancy and childbirth remain structurally dangerous, life-threatening undertakings.
Due to a lack of medical infrastructure.
Right, exactly. Lack of infrastructure, prenatal care, and emergency intervention capabilities.
But in the Netherlands?
In the Netherlands, that number plunges to a microscopic 4.3.
4.3 versus 216.1. I mean, it is a completely different reality of what it means to be a woman.
It really is.
The systemic vision in the Netherlands is clearly zero maternal mortality. Like, they have built a medical, infrastructural, and social support system so robust, so accessible, that the systemic risk to a mother's life is nearly eradicated. You don't have to fear for your life just to have a child.
And we see a highly correlated story with the second health metric, the adolescent birth rate.
Okay, how's that measured?
This measures births per 1,000 women ages 15 to 19. And it's a crucial metric because high adolescent birth rates almost universally trumpate the educational and economic opportunities of young women. Right. It basically locks them out of the human development gains we discussed earlier.
Makes total sense. If you're having a child at 16, your chances of hitting that 18.6 years of expected schooling drop dramatically.
Exactly. You're pulled right out of the system.
So what are the numbers there?
Globally, the adolescent birth rate is 39.079.
Okay.
In the Netherlands, it is just 1.858.
Wow. So by protecting reproductive health and providing comprehensive education and access to family planning, the Netherlands ensures that young women actually stay in the education system.
Exactly. They secure the foundation.
They secure the knowledge pillar for women, which then acts as a launch pad directly into the next dimension of the GII, power and labor.
Right. It is a sequential progression. When health and education are structurally secured, societal participation and empowerment naturally follow.
How does the GII measure that empowerment?
The GII measures this empowerment partly by looking at political representation. Literally, who is actually making the rules.
Okay.
Globally, women hold an average of 26.5% of parliament seats.
A little over a quarter.
Right. But in the Netherlands, that figure sits at 39.1%.
Nearly 40%,
Yeah.
which is a significant shift in who is actually writing the laws, designing the safety nets, and shaping the future of the country.
Absolutely.
But for me, the most illuminating statistic in this entire section was the evolution of female labor force participation.
Oh, this part is fascinating.
Because this is where you see the 30-year timeline really tell a story of profound societal transformation.
The labor force data is incredibly telling. Let's look back at 1990 again.
Okay.
Female labor force participation in the Netherlands was only 43.89%.
Wow, less than half.
Less than half of working-age women were in the formal workforce.
That is such a fascinating baseline because I think a lot of people just assume the Netherlands has always been this progressive, egalitarian utopia.
Right, they assume it's just always been that way.
But in 1990, their female labor participation wasn't actually that high at all. They had a very traditional male breadwinner model in many ways.
They did.
They had to actively build the modern paradigm.
And over the decades, they did exactly that. As they optimized their health systems, expanded higher education for women, and built out childcare infrastructure, that number just surged.
Where did it end up?
By 2023, it reached 64.1%.
That is nearly a 50% increase in workforce participation over a single generation.
It's massive.
And as you noted, you do not get 64% of your female population into the formal workforce just by asking nicely.
No, you need massive systemic support.
Right.
You require accessible childcare, you need equitable parental leave policies, you need tax structures that don't penalize dual income households.
Yeah, and you just need a society that functionally and culturally supports working mothers.
Exactly.
Okay, so the wealth is clearly there. The HDI proves that.
Yes.
And based on the Gender Inequality Index, we know that wealth and opportunity are shared incredibly well between men and women. The glass ceiling is heavily fractured, if not entirely broken.
Right.
But my pushback from earlier still stands when we look at the other major fault line in society, class.
Yeah. Yes.
What about the gap between the rich and the poor? Because, I mean, you can have perfect gender equality, but if all the men and all the women are equally poor, while a tiny group of billionaires hoards the 0.955 HDI lifestyle...
Then it's not a utopia.
Exactly. It's just an oligarchy with great gender parity.
That is a very fair critique, and the creators of the Human Development Report anticipated exactly that concern.
Oh, they did.
Yes. That takes us to a metric designed specifically to answer the question of class and distribution, the inequality-adjusted HDI, or the IHDI.
Okay, how exactly does this act as a reality check on the standard HDI?
Think of the traditional HDI as the absolute maximum potential of a country based on its averages.
Like the best case scenario.
Right. The IHDI comes in and penalizes a country's score based on how unequally its health, education, and income are actually distributed across the real population.
Oh, I see.
If a country has extreme inequality, the IHDI deeply discounts their original score.
So it acts like a discount rate on human development.
Yes.
Or like a penalty tax.
Yeah.
The higher the inequality, the more of your so-called progress gets shaved off the top because it's not actually reaching the people on the ground.
That is a perfect way to look at it. And globally, the picture this metric paints is quite grim.
I can imagine.
When you account for the gap between the richest and the poorest citizens worldwide, the global average HDI loses a massive 22% of its value.
22%.
Yes.
I want you listening to really internalize that for a second. Think about your own community, your own state or country.
Yeah, picture it.
If you factored in the very real gap between the most privileged person in your city and the least privileged person the gap in the quality of the hospitals they go to, the schools their kids attend, the food they can afford, how much of your country's statistical progress would instantly evaporate as an illusion? Would it be 20%? 30%?
It's sobering.
It is a deeply sobering thought that more than a fifth of global progress is basically a statistical mirage created by the extreme wealth of those at the very top.
It really puts the global average in perspective.
It really does. But then we look at the Netherlands.
Right. The Netherlands ranks 5th in the world for the inequality-adjusted HDI.
Wow, 5th again.
And their loss due to inequality is merely 6.6%.
Only 6.6%.
Yeah. They retain almost all of their human development value because those benefits, the health, the education, the income, are distributed incredibly evenly across the socioeconomic spectrum.
Let's break down how they achieve that 6.6%, because the presentation deck provides this fascinating waterfall effect, showing exactly where they lose points.
Yeah, the waterfall chart is great.
The index subtracts value based on 3 distinct inequalities.
Yeah.
Right? Inequality in education, inequality in income, and inequality in life expectancy.
Exactly. So their inequality in education results in a 4.65% loss.
Okay.
And their income inequality sits at an 11.37% loss.
Okay, so there is some income disparity.
There is, yes. But by global standards, these are remarkably low, pointing to strong progressive taxation and equitable public school funding.
Right.
But the most staggering achievement of the Dutch system is found in the final metric, the minimal loss in life expectancy due to inequality.
This is the stat that really stopped me in my tracks.
Yeah.
What is their loss on life expectancy?
It is a tiny 3.3% loss.
3.3%.
And impressively, that is actually down from a 3.7% loss back in 2010, meaning they are continually improving it.
Yeah. Let's translate that 3.3% into physical reality.
Okay.
In most countries, poverty is a death sentence. It limits your access to preventative medicine. It pushes you into more dangerous occupations. It exposes you to environmental toxins.
Yes.
And the sheer chronic stress of poverty degrades your biological health. Poor people literally die younger.
It's a tragic global reality.
But a 3.3% inequality loss in the Netherlands means that whether you are a wealthy corporate CEO banking a massive salary, or you are a street sweeper working for minimum wage,
Right.
your biological lifespan is protected by the exact same robust safety nets.
It represents an absolute triumph of public infrastructure. The quality of health care, the safety of the urban environment, the access to preventative medicine. It is nearly identical regardless of your tax bracket.
That's amazing.
The system fundamentally refuses to let poor people die earlier than rich people.
It's incredible. So let's summarize the case we've built so far. We have airtight, multi-decade data.
Yes, we do.
The Netherlands has top-tier wealth. They have near-perfect gender parity. They have incredibly long lives, highly educated citizens, and a systemic distribution model that ensures almost everyone shares in these benefits.
Right.
By every single rule of the 20th century economic playbook, the Netherlands is an invincible developmental fortress.
They have optimized the human experience within their borders to a degree rarely seen in human history.
But, and this is a massive but, here is where the story gets really interesting, and this is the core conflict of our entire deep dive today.
Here comes the drop.
You see, for decades, we've graded countries purely on how well they treat their own citizens within their own borders. We looked at their domestic scorecards.
Right.
But in recent years, the United Nations Development Program recognized a massive planet-sized blind spot in this methodology.
A huge blind spot.
And they introduced a final, devastating metric to the scorecard. The Planetary Pressures Adjusted HDI, or the PHDI.
The PHDI. This fundamentally shifts the paradigm of what it means to be successful.
How so?
Well, it takes the traditional HDI and applies a severe penalty to countries for the ecological damage they inflict on the Earth in order to achieve their high standards of living.
Okay, what kind of damage?
It specifically targets 2 global pressures: high per capita carbon dioxide emissions and high per capita material footprint.
And when you apply this ecological penalty to the developmental fortress of the Netherlands,
A fortress absolutely crumbles.
it does. The numbers here are just shocking to look at. Their world-beating HDI score of 0.955 plunges down to 0.740.
Which represents a loss of 22.5% of their developmental achievements, wiped out entirely due to ecological debt.
And what happens to their global ranking? The country that was sitting proudly at number 8 in the world.
They drop a massive 27 places.
Oh my God.
They plummet from being the 8th most developed country in the world down to 36.
8th to 36. It is a statistical freefall.
It really is. What the PHDI reveals is the invisible tax of modern development.
The invisible tax, I like that.
The data forces us to confront a highly uncomfortable truth.
Which is?
The extraordinarily high standard of living in the Netherlands, the 18 years of education, the pristine hospitals, the massive wealth, it is heavily, inextricably subsidized by extracting immense value from the planet.
Right.
It is a physical cost that simply doesn't show up on traditional economic ledgers like GDP, and it doesn't show up on the standard HDI.
But the Earth is keeping the receipts.
Exactly. The Earth is keeping the receipts.
Okay, wait, I have to interrupt here because I need to push back on this.
Sure, go ahead.
This is where my brain starts short-circuiting.
Why is that?
Because when you or I or anyone listening thinks of the Netherlands, What is the immediate visual image that comes to mind?
Right. I know where you're going with this.
It's bicycles.
Yeah.
It's millions of people biking to work. It's massive, futuristic wind turbines spinning over green fields.
Yes.
It is highly efficient, walkable green cities where everyone uses public transit. They are literally globally famous for their sustainable urban design and green architecture.
They are the poster child for it.
Exactly. So how on earth can a country that is practically synonymous with green living drop 27 places in a metric designed to measure environmental pressure? It logically does not compute.
It is a brilliant paradox, isn't it?
It's totally baffling.
And it gets to the very heart of the difference between the aesthetic of sustainability and the actual physics of global consumption.
Okay, explain that.
To answer your disbelief, we have to look under the hood of the Netherlands' consumption habits. We have to separate the public relations imagery of green energy and bike lanes from the hard physical reality of their material footprint.
Right.
We need to examine what experts call the decoupling illusion.
The decoupling illusion. Okay, I love that term. Let's dissect this massive PhDI drop by looking at the two distinct components that cause the UN penalty.
Okay.
What the country emits into the air, which is carbon dioxide, versus what the country physically consumes, which is the material footprint.
All right, let's start with the relatively good news, because it explains why you picture windmills when you think of the Netherlands.
Well, lay it on me.
The Dutch have actually made significant measurable strides in reducing their per capita CO2 emissions.
Oh, they have?
Yes. The data from the report shows their emissions peaked around 1996 at 11.7 tons per capita.
Okay, 11.7 tons.
Through massive investments in renewable energy, domestic efficiency, and systemic policy changes, they have managed to drive that number down consistently.
That's great. Where is it now?
By 2023, it sits at 6.7 tons per capita.
Okay, so that is a massive drop in territorial carbon. They've almost cut it in half since the mid-90s.
They have.
Though, to be fair to the global reality, 6.7 tons is still significantly higher than the global average of 4.5 tons.
True.
But the trend line is undeniably pointing in the right direction. They are doing the hard work on domestic carbon emissions.
Yes, the domestic carbon curve is actively bending. But the bad news, the metric that truly acts as the anchor dragging them down 27 places in the global rankings, is their material footprint.
Let's define this clearly for the listener. What exactly is a material footprint?
It's a good question.
Because it sounds like it just means how much trash you throw away, but it's vastly more complex than that.
Far more complex. The material footprint measures the total absolute weight of raw materials extracted globally to meet the domestic final demand of a country.
Okay, wait.
We are talking about the physical weight of biomass, fossil fuels, metal ores, and non-metallic minerals. It accounts for the entire global supply chain required to sustain a nation's lifestyle.
Meaning, it's not just what the Dutch dig out of their own soil in Europe.
Exactly, not just domestic extraction.
It is the weight of the lithium that was mined in South America, refined in Asia, and put into the battery of the e-bike you just bought in Amsterdam.
Right.
It is the weight of the water, the fertilizer, and the degraded soil used to grow the soy in Brazil that is shipped across the ocean to feed the livestock that produces the artisanal cheese you buy in Rotterdam.
Yes, all of that is counted.
It tracks the massive, invisible global extraction required to maintain your pristine local lifestyle.
Precisely. It is a measure of global ecological demand.
Okay.
And while the Netherlands' domestic carbon emissions have been dropping, their material footprint has stubbornly, aggressively increased.
Oh.
In 1990, their material footprint was 26.3 tons per person.
Okay, 26.3.
By 2023, it had surged to 32.7 tons per person.
32.7 tons. Yes. That is over 72,000 pounds of physical earth extracted, processed, and consumed every single year for every single man, woman, and child in the Netherlands.
It's an immense amount of material.
I mean, unless they are individually eating 32 tons of imported Gouda and tulip bulbs, that number represents an astronomical level of embedded consumption.
It really does.
Let's compare that to the global average. How much does the average citizen of Earth consume?
The world average material footprint is just 12.7 tons.
12.7 tons.
Yes.
So the Dutch are consuming a staggering 2.6 times the global average of physical resources.
Exactly 2.6 times.
That is the ecological debt. That is why they dropped 27 places.
And this is exactly where we uncover the decoupling challenge, or the decoupling illusion.
Right, the illusion.
For the last decade, highly developed nations have been patting themselves on the back, celebrating this concept of decoupling.
Which means what exactly?
They point to line charts showing their GDP going up while their domestic carbon emissions are going down. They claim to the world that they have successfully decoupled economic growth from environmental destruction.
They claim they have found the holy grail of green capitalism.
Exactly.
But the material footprint data utterly destroys that narrative.
It completely dismantles it.
It proves that decoupling is an illusion. They haven't decoupled their prosperity from physical resource consumption at all.
No, they haven't.
They have just exported the dirty work.
That's exactly what's happening.
They are importing the materials, the heavily mined minerals, the resource-intensive biomass, the embedded fossil fuels in manufactured goods from developing nations.
Yes.
The actual physical extraction and the ecological devastation are happening somewhere else, far away in the global south, so it doesn't show up on their local carbon ledger.
Right, out of sight, out of mind.
But it is entirely 100% driven by their domestic demand.
It is a masterful, albeit perhaps unintentional, geographical sleight of hand. The PhDI catches this trick. It looks at the global ledger. It says, you cannot claim to be a highly developed, progressive nation if your high standard of living requires the continuous, unsustainable extraction of finite resources from the rest of the planet.
I was trying to think of a way to visualize this, and it's kind of like, imagine someone going on a super strict, highly publicized diet.
Okay.
They are absolutely determined to be healthy and quote-unquote clean. So they go through their house and clear all the junk food out of their own kitchen.
Rice?
Their pantry is pristine. It's just glass jars of quinoa, kale, and organic lentils. They look at their kitchen and think, I'm doing amazing. My kitchen is so healthy.
Sounds very virtuous.
But then, every single night, they order massive amounts of fast food takeout from the restaurant down the street.
Yeah, I see.
Their kitchen, their local environment looks incredibly clean. Their personal cooking footprint is way down.
Right.
But their actual physical consumption is higher than ever. They've just outsourced the mess, the grease, and the packaging to someone else's kitchen.
That is an incredibly apt, powerful analogy.
Thanks.
The pristine Dutch cities, the beautiful bike lanes, the local wind farms, that is the clean kitchen.
Right.
It looks perfect. But the 32.7-ton material footprint, that is the massive daily order of takeout.
Yeah.
And the critical problem is that the Earth is the restaurant, and it is rapidly running out of ingredients to fulfill those orders.
So when we step back, what does this all mean?
That's the big question.
When we zoom out and look at all these incredible conflicting data points from the 2023-2024 report,
Right.
from the soaring heights of the HDI to the crashing reality of the PHDI, we are looking at something I think we should call the Netherlands paradigm.
The Netherlands paradigm.
Okay.
I think that perfectly encapsulates the dual nature of what we're seeing.
Yeah.
It is simultaneously a beacon of profound hope and a massive flashing red warning sign for humanity.
Right. On one hand, the traditional HDI, the incredible GI, and the equitable IHDI prove conclusively that human ingenuity, intentional public policy, and social investment can virtually eradicate extreme inequality, systemic poverty, and gender disparity.
That's the hope part.
The Netherlands proves that a society can be actively engineered where humans flourish, where they live long, healthy lives, and where they're highly educated.
Exactly.
It proves that utopia purely for humans is logistically possible. We know how to do it.
Well, on the other hand, the PHDI data proves that the current accepted blueprint for reaching that human utopia is fundamentally flawed.
Because reaching it currently requires devouring the planet at an entirely unsustainable rate.
Exactly.
I want you listening to really think about the terrifying math here.
The math is grim.
The global average HDI is currently 0.756. Our stated global goal as a species is to raise the whole world to the Netherlands level of 0.955.
Which is a noble goal.
Right. We want everyone on Earth to have zero maternal mortality. We want every child to have 18 years of expected education. We want everyone to have economic security.
Absolutely.
But if all 8 billion people on Earth try to achieve that utopia using a 32.7-ton material footprint,
The math simply breaks.
the Earth literally, physically cannot support it. We do not have 2.6 Earths to extract from.
No, we don't.
The biosphere would undergo total collapse long before we reach global utopia.
And that ultimately is the defining takeaway from this massive data set. The next era of human progress cannot just be about raising the traditional HDI anymore.
Right.
For the developed world, the goal isn't just generating more wealth or finding new ways to consume.
Wait, is it?
The defining existential challenge of the 21st century is closing the massive gap between the HDI and the PHDI.
Yeah.
It is about figuring out how to maintain that beautiful .955 quality of life, how to keep the hospitals safe and the schools excellent, while drastically, radically shrinking that material footprint.
Because true, lasting prosperity cannot be a payday loan taken out against the future of the environment.
Exactly. Because eventually, the ecological bill comes due.
And no amount of wealth can buy you a new planet.
No, it can't.
We leave you with this provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day. For decades, we've ranked countries by how well they take care of their citizens today.
Right.
We look at their revenue, their health outcomes, their pristine, clean kitchens, and we applaud them.
And rightfully so in some respects.
Sure. But if a country's high-consumption lifestyle mathematically guarantees a harsher, more volatile, and heavily depleted world for the citizens of tomorrow,
Yeah.
can we honestly still call that country highly developed?